Hello, this is part 4 of chapter 11. We did talk, I think we talked about, in part 3, we ended with the zebra mussel. The next one is the chestnut blight. It is a fungal infection, and it's, I don't know why I did that. Chestnut blight and the Dutch elm disease, both of them are fungi that affects various plants in this area, obviously. The chestnut plant and the Dutch elm plant. The chestnut blight has pretty much killed off most of the chestnut plants up, the Vermont, Maine area. Hemlock woody Adelaide, which came from China and Japan, it is a problem right now, and it's slated to eventually kill off 90% of all the hemlock plants. Now, the hemlock trees are really, really important because in this area, remember, we are in the boreal forest area. Our species diversity is already pretty low. And the chestnut plant is the hemlock tree is actually a home to a bunch of species of birds. So you get rid of the trees, you'll get rid of those birds. They also produce vital shade for trout to grow in, trout to breed in, sorry. So lack of birds and lack of trout. Hey, at least chicken is safe. So what can Congress do to prevent this? Here are a few things that they should do. One is to reverse. The US government actually just has a list that says dirty plants and clean plants. Dirty organisms and clean organisms, and they have to go through a series of screening process before they go from the dirty list to the clean list. But that is a weird concept because there are no dirty organisms and clean organisms. All of them are native to some place, and where they're native, they are clean. So it would be better to actually move them from invasive to native, because eventually, if you give them long enough, if you give an organism time long enough, and here we're talking about not like 10 years or 20 years, we're talking about a couple of 100 years, they do kind of incorporate themselves into the ecosystem. Unlike certain things, like if you were to look at the kudzu, the problem with this, because it's so fast growing, chances are it's not really going to incorporate itself like a part of the ecosystem, but just take over the ecosystem. And that is definitely a problem. But if you give it enough time, life will kind of develop around it. There are going to be mutations within organisms, and they will eventually become native to our landscape. For example, the grass in front of your house is most of the grass that we have in all through the United States are not native species, but life has, different organisms have learned to live with them. There are different insects that live with them, different types of weeds that grow in there. So they have incorporated themselves into our ecosystem. The biggest thing that the federal government or any government can do is actually to provide enough money for these initiatives. Without the money in it, you really cannot do anything. You can have a whole bunch of departments, you can have a whole bunch of organizations created against it, you can have laws passed, but if there is no money for implementation, there's no way for any of these things to act and for you to remedy any kind of invasive species problem. So it's not just the will of the people to do something. It's adequate funding. No adequate funding, nothing happens. Again, remember, invasive species is not on the top of the list of priorities for most people. It should be, but it isn't, because the kind of damage we see from these, it's not like an immediate thing. It's not like a bomb going off somewhere and like 25 people are dead and so we have to do something about it. It's not that kind of a emergency. It's not an acute emergency. It's a chronic problem. Most of the times when we do put money into chronic problems, at some point of time we lose the will to do it because we don't see immediate effects of it. So the more serious problem that we have to think about, which makes this actually a chronic problem, is pests and pathogens. Right now, we're seeing a lot of pests and pathogens within trees and plants and stuff like that, but it's not very far away from the realm of possibilities that it could be human beings. We do see, for example, the Zika virus is a pest and a pathogen that is not native to the United States. Thanks to travel, now it's in the United States. It is an invasive species. That mosquito is an invasive species here. Little is being done about that also. So I really want you guys to kind of go over these policies. The essence of it is to create more comprehensive policies, to look at a species not just as a standalone species, but how it links to the whole ecosystem, and then actually to put in money and to understand that there is a difference between having a chronic problem and an acute problem. We may not see the benefits of this tomorrow or day after tomorrow, but in the long run, we definitely are going to benefit from making sure that there's less invasive species, because at the end of the day, we need our ecosystem to be perfect. We need our, perfect is not the right word, to be at least resilient. We need proper ecosystem, species diversity. We need proper genetic diversity, because at the top of the food chain is human beings. When the links in the bottom start to rot, it is eventually going to hurt us. So I'm going to go back to the slides, and then we have a couple of things. So that's that. Here's a comprehensive list of all the types of North American invasive species. Am I going to expect you to learn all of these? No, don't do that. This little sucker is huge rat-looking thing that is all over the rivers in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and the Northeast. Ugh, rats. Again, invasive species have cost a lot of money because they do introduce new pests into the ecosystem, which again, if you forget about protecting the environment, if you forget about everything about protecting the environment, being a tree hugger and all of this, these things cost money. They have a tremendous impact on the economy. They have a tremendous impact on the landscape. They have a tremendous impact on the ecosystem. They have a tremendous impact on our quality of life. The next one, pollution. We have talked about this in terms of pesticides. Runoff is a huge problem. Again, if you're introducing a new kind of pest, beetle, insect that's going to ravage your crops, you're going to end up putting more pesticides to kill those things, which is going to have runoff, which is going to have water pollution. So it is a cascading effect. Lead at one point of time, these are just examples. It's not a comprehensive list. Lead at one point of time was used in paints. It made paint shiny. It made, they used to, if you get glassware like China from like the 1800s, 1900s, very pretty, this dark blue paint on it that they have, that is all lead. Population, at the crux of all of this is human population. We tend to move from point A to point B a lot more. Travel has become more accessible. Most of us don't live in the same place that we were born. We're spread out all over the world, and we carry a lot of things around with us. Some people even carry rats. Dirty people even carry rats, but that's a different thing. Over harvesting, we've talked about this in terms of the Green Revolution and the Dust Bowl, one of the biggest right now. I don't know if we talked about this in class, that the fish stock of most of the fish has depleted. Most of the fish that we want in the wild, because we have overfished. So a couple of examples there is the fish stocks in the ocean, and passenger pigeons We ate them. Bushmeat trade. Now that is a very interesting thing. In most of the African countries, they do have, when they say bushmeat trade, we're talking about exotic meats. Chimpanzee, kangaroo, lion, for that matter. All of these come under the bushmeat trade. They are not regulated under any circumstance. They do spread a lot of disease. The story of AIDS is the story of bushmeat. Ebola is the spread of Ebola was because of bushmeat. There are a lot of diseases that have spread because of bushmeat. Again, they're not regulated. They do carry a lot of diseases. We bring that disease into, that is one of, I would consider that to be a more acute problem. It is an invasive species that is not supposed to be in the human population, mutates and kills a whole bunch of people. Obviously, there is a lot of commercial interest in animal pelts. Blame the Chinese for this. The Chinese actually believe that the rhino horn is an aphrodisiac, and they, by themselves, I mean, given they are 1.6 billion people, have been really instrumental in getting rid of a lot of rhinos. There's also people in India and people in China who believe that ivory is ornamental. I own something, so full display. So animal carcasses and pelts are good trade. It is cheaper than trading drugs. I'm not asking anyone to get into the drug trade. It's the amount of punishment doled out if you are caught smuggling live animals, selling fur and horns and pelts. It's very, very minor. So if you were an intelligent person, you would rather deal in all of that stuff instead of drugs, which the punishment is more severe. There is also a huge demand for exotic animals. I think a couple of classes back we've talked about it. There are actually today more Royal Bengal tigers in captivity in homes in the United States than in the wild. I'm not talking about captive in the zoo. I'm talking about people being that excrement crazy and buying a wild cat to keep at home as a pet. It is not a pet. A couple of examples. I'm going to stop it at this point, and I'm going to get into the laws in the last video.